So now I'd like to introduce the speaker, Roger Luther. He is the Broome County historian. He is also the executive director of the Preservation Association of the Southern Tier. And he's going to be talking to us about the taking of Cannonsville, which is one of the towns that was taken for the Cannonsville Reservoir. I want to thank you all for coming, and I especially want to thank you, Roger, for coming and being here today and giving this program. And I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thanks so much for inviting me. Hopefully you'll enjoy this, but yeah, I'm looking forward to it. This is the story of Cannonsville. Cannonsville was not in Broome County. It's actually located about 3 miles east of the county line, just past Deposit. But it affected a lot of people in Broome County. So even today, there are a lot of raw emotions about what happened at Cannonsville. So when I moved here, gosh, 25 years ago, I moved to Binghamton. I heard about Cannonsville and got real interested in it. Started going over there, taking photos of it, doing a lot of research. Finally wrote a column on it, and then have done a few talks since then. It's just an incredibly interesting story. And, you know, it's been, what, 65 years since this all happened. That's over 3 generations. And I think it's just very important that we keep telling the story. So, you know, future generations know exactly what happened at Cannonsville. And I got to figure that it's probably, these stories are very similar to what happened at the Rondout, Never Sinking Papacton reservoirs as well, where every one of those took communities. So, yeah, I'll get started here. I've got a lot of information, a lot of photographs, a lot of rare photographs. And the way I was able to come up with a lot of this stuff is by working with local historical societies, interviewing people that used to live in the Cannonsville area, and searching newspaper archives. Also got a lot of nice information from the New York City Department of Environmental Protection. This picture on the first slide here, you're sitting on a roadway that if you were to drive straight down and keep going until you were about 100 feet below the surface of the water, that's about where Cannonsville was. So let me set the stage here. 1950, the city of New York took possession of several thousand acres of land in Delaware County. It was the first step of a plan to dam the west branch of the Delaware River and divert water to New York City. Program would destroy 5 communities: Cannonsville, Rock Royal, Granton, Rock Rift, and Beerston. It would force hundreds of residents from their homes. Every house, farm, business, school, and church would be destroyed or removed. Every grave would be relocated. Officially, this was known as the Cannonsville Reservoir Project. Locally, it had another name: the taking. Okay, so that kind of sets the stage here. This is a kind of a nice composite image. That light blue area shows the original river bed of the west branch of the Delaware River. I don't know if you can see my mouse arrow or not, but this is Trout Creek. And that's where Cannonsville was. In fact, that picture that we were just looking at was taken from this spot right here. So what I want to talk about is a little bit of the history of Cannonsville, talk about the New York City water supply system, the Reservoir project, and what's happening there today. Now, again, the sources: Broome County Historical Society, Deposit Historical Society, Delaware County Historical Association, Department of Environmental Protection. There is a book by Helen Schreiber Zant called Memories. I don't know, you may be familiar with this, but Helen lived in that area. She was affected by the taking. And afterwards, she went to everybody she could make contact with and record their memories. And that's what this book is. It's just all sorts of memories of living in the Canonsville area. It's an excellent book. I don't know if it's even still available. I found it about 10 years ago at a grocery store in Walton. And then there's a film, Indian Summer, a folk films production. And that was made at the time that the land was being clearing, the houses were being burned. There's a lot of excellent footage of what was happening at that time. And in addition, the filmmakers kind of wove a story around that. They told a story about an old man and a young boy that were in that area and how this was affecting them. But the real value of that film to me is the actual real footage of what happened when they were clearing the land. I should say that the video quality on that movie was absolutely awful. I found a few copies, but they were all the same, very, very poor quality. And I'm going to show some shots in this talk, and you'll see what I'm talking about. But I do understand that since then, a filmmaker in Chicago got a grant to actually restore that film. So a restored version of Indian Summer does exist now. Haven't seen it, but I understand he did an excellent job on it. Another interesting thing about that movie is the original soundtrack was by Pete Seeger. Okay, there's Tompkins, town of Tompkins. Here's Deposit. Here's where Cannonsville was. Okay, brief history of Cannonsville. Cannonsville was actually known as the city. 1786, Jesse Dickinson was the first non-native settler. He established Dickinson City, later be known as the city. He laid out streets, built sawmills, grist mill, town hall, several houses. He had a grand idea to create this thriving, growing city. It didn't work. In 1795, he ended up leaving the area. His property was bought by Waite Cannon. Waite died shortly after that, and the property was taken over by his cousin Benjamin Cannon. The industries at the time: lumbering, rafting, timber, milling, dairy farming. Okay, everything went along fine until 1950, and that's when residents were notified that their land would be taken for the New York City water supply. 1955, the project finally began. 1962 was the deadline for everybody to be off their property. 1965, the reservoir filled. Here's some old images of Canonsville. This is 1880. Just a beautiful little community. They had 3 churches there, if I remember right. So now let's fast forward to the 1950s. That's what Cannonsville looked like in the 1950s. Big creamery and dairy farm here was, I guess, the leading industry at that time. You can see the churches. This is the hotel that we saw in that one of those pictures. It all looks very, very clean. The Friendly Tavern. Yeah, the memories book that I mentioned is just full of little stories about all of these places. The cemetery, one of the cemeteries. They had a covered bridge. And a couple of the farms. So that's a quick ride through the town in the 50s. Now the other city. City of New York. Draws its water from upstate lakes and reservoirs. And I'll talk a little bit about the water supply system. It all started back in the mid-19th century. The city of New York took its water from lakes and reservoirs on the east side of the Hudson River. It's called the Croton Watershed. Now includes 3 lakes and 13 reservoirs. But they found they needed more water as the city grew. So at the turn of the last century, 2 new reservoirs were built in the Catskill region on the west side of the Hudson River. So the Ashokan in 1915 and the Schoharie in 1926. Water from those reservoirs traveled through an 18-mile tunnel and a 92-mile aqueduct to reach the city. They needed more water. So the Delaware watershed, they started building reservoirs in the Delaware watershed. 1940s to 1954, 3 more reservoirs were built on the east branch of the Delaware River. And that's the Rondout, the Neversink, and the Pacton. 85-mile Delaware aqueduct would carry the water under the Hudson River to the Croton watershed and on to the city. And they needed more water. In fact, there was a huge water shortage. In 1949, New York City experienced a very severe drought. These 3 new East Branch reservoirs weren't completed yet, so the city was desperately hurting for water. The reservoirs that were in use dropped to 35% of capacity. So these were completed eventually. Neversink was completed in 1950, Rondout 1951, Pepacton in 1954. But even with that, they decided they better build another reservoir because this just wouldn't be enough. So two solutions were proposed. One was, why not take water from the Hudson River? The other was take water from the west branch of the Delaware River, that's Canonsville. And that's the one that was selected. December 1949, Cannonsville Reservoir project was announced. It's going to cost $140 million. It would have a capacity of 96 billion gallons. And this is how it would work. Water would travel through a 44-mile tunnel to the Delaware Aqueduct and on to New York City. Okay, here's the entire system today. New York City currently uses 1.5 billion gallons of water per day. Total capacity with all of those reservoirs is reported to be 1.85 billion, which is not a whole lot more than what the current demand is. Croton system supplies 10% of the demand, Catskill system 40%. The four reservoirs of the Delaware system supply 50% of the city's daily demand. And Canonsville supplies about 7.5% of the total demand. So that's a quick overview of the water system. And here's the project: destruction of a community, construction of a reservoir. That's the map that I showed you a little while ago. This is where the dam would be built. And that's the effect. So that's what the reservoir looks like today. December, the last day of the year, 1949, Cannonsville Reservoir project is announced. Two days later, this appeared in the Oneonta Star. Would flood 3 entire towns. The village of Cannonsville will be under billions of gallons of water if the New York City reservoir plan is carried out. Community includes a new school, 2 churches, 4 stores, a 50-employee milk plant, and about 400 residents. So as you can imagine, there was a lot of resistance to this. March of 1950, New York State Water Power and Control Commission listened for 2 days to opponents and supporters of the project. So there were a lot of public hearings. Finally, in November of 1950, the reservoir is approved. And the State Water Power Commission officially rejected the proposal that they draw water from the Hudson River. Okay, work's going to start early in 1955. First task will be to acquire the land, and the man commented, "We don't anticipate too much difficulty." February 55, here's an interesting article. The Cannonsville project may prove to be the single greatest mistake in capital construction in the history of New York City. So it was not a popular move. 1955, construction begins. There's a big ceremony. Simple ceremonies cut short by near zero weather mark the start of a 6-year job of building a dam and reservoir that is expected to ensure sufficient water for New York City for the rest of the century. By the way, we're into the next century. 300 people watched at the site of a 310-foot shaft for a 44-mile aqueduct. That's the 44-mile tunnel. You know, the mayor of New York was actually operating the excavator there, putting the first dump of dirt into the hole, I guess, or digging it out. Expected to be complete 1961. Actually, there was a report that when the mayor was operating this big piece of equipment, he did something wrong and the bucket crashed into a truck or something. So he had to get out, and some guy that knew what he was doing got up there and took over for him. And then afterwards, everybody went to Roscoe for lunch. All right, this is interesting. Canonsville used to have an old home day every day. And 1956, they were going to have a very special one because it would be the last one. Article, doomed Canonsville prepares for a last fling. Old Home Day will not be a day of weeping. It will be a day of tribute to our native soil. And there it is. More than 3,000 people jammed the streets of this soon-to-be doomed community to celebrate the 180th anniversary of its settlement by Jesse Dickinson. One of the happiest days in the history of Canonsville, and likewise one of the saddest. It was a celebration to end all celebrations in the little village of from 350 to 400 inhabitants. Within 3 to 4 years, the entire village is to be dismantled by the New York City Board of Water Supply to make way for the Canonsville Dam and Reservoir. That was all in the Oneonta Star the day after this ceremony. (1962) demolition begins. Another article. It's beginning at the end today for Canonsville. Residents have been told to leave their homes by today. Bids were received to demolish the village of Canonsville. And here's some pictures of all that happening. All right, these are some still shots from the film that I mentioned, and you can see how poor the quality is. But I wanted to include them because it actually shows what happened. I read accounts where people would be up on the highway looking down into the valley at night, and it's exactly what they would see is fires and smoke everywhere. Okay, in 1963, the cemeteries were removed. See, application for removal of bodies in certain cemeteries now being taken for the construction of the Cannonsville Dam will be completed no later than 60 days after February 28th. Bodies may be moved to any other cemetery or burial place in Delaware County or in an adjoining county. And as a matter of fact, a lot of them ended up in the Pocahontas Cemetery. So 11 cemeteries and burial grounds were removed. 2,123 graves were relocated. Benjamin Cannon's grave was moved to Papacton, 45 miles from his former home and gravesite. I used when I first got associated with this, I kind of assumed that there might be some ruins still down underwater, but that's not the case. They absolutely scraped the area clean. Okay, one more time just to get your bearings. This is where that first picture was taken from, looking down this way. Which is this spot right here. The dam is way down here off the map, and the intake chamber is up here. This is the start of the 44-mile tunnel. Okay, at this point, everything's pretty much gone, except it looks like the dairy farm and the bridge are still there. So when they were getting ready to build the dam, I guess the first thing they had to do was build a conduit to direct the water around where the dam was going to be built. This is, tunnel project must have been amazing. I mean, they would go in, they would clear out, stone, load these, rail carts, and then wheel them back out and dump them and send back in for more loads. And I gotta figure it was not pleasant work and very dangerous. In fact, there was at least one death in the tunnel. This is the Delaware Aqueduct. Okay, now the dam. Water is rising. Obviously, that bridge is still underwater, but that was not actually in Canonsville, it was nearby. And there's the dam. The water is still filling, gets up to this level, it flows over here and then back down into the river. That's for the overflow, and then there's also a tunnel through here. Now it's cool. Okay, now we're going to hear about the leak. Back in 2009, New York City announced plans to build a hydroelectric plant at the dam. In 2014, they began work, and then the following year, somebody noticed a turbid discharge during test bores. So that got some excitement going. The work stopped, and repair of the leak began. But just to be safe, they started draining the reservoir. They drained about 1 billion gallons per day. And it's interesting, I would make regular trips over there to to see what was going on. And, you know, with each trip, the water level was down a little bit more and more and more. And I think that point there is about as low as it got. So 2016, the repair work was completed. And the plant project was postponed for 2 years. In 2018, a scaled down hydroelectric plant was announced to be completed in 2025. And then the other leak, and you probably know about this leak. There's a leak in the Delaware Aqueduct, right below the Hudson River. Leaks 33 million gallons of water per day. And it's been doing that since 1988, 500 feet below the Hudson River. So the fix is to build a 2.5-mile bypass tunnel around the leaking section. So the leak is here in the original aqueduct, and this is the bypass to go around it. Bypass tunnel, I believe, is complete now, but it's just not connected back up to the main line. And recently, last year, they said they plan to shut down the aqueduct for 5 to 8 months, starting in October of 2023 and complete it in 2024. But that's not happening. It actually, last I saw, they pushed it out another year. What an incredible project, though. So when they shut down the aqueduct and connect it up to the main line, connect the other line up to the main line, no water will be taken from the Delaware system at all. Wow, what a job. All right, Cannonsville today. You know, if I was telling somebody just the other day, if you were to drive through Cannonsville today, you would think this is absolute paradise. You know, it's quiet, it's gorgeous. There's nature and wildlife everywhere you look. There's hardly no traffic. It's just it's ideal. And there's no way of knowing that there's a community that used to lie 100 feet below the surface of that water. There is a couple indications. One is this one sign that says former site of Cannonsville. I see eagles over there quite often. It's gorgeous. And this kiosk. It has some nice historical info on all the hamlets that were affected. There are a couple other things that were salvaged and relocated. This is a war memorial. It was relocated to Speedwell Mountain, which is well, just south of the no, I'm sorry, just north of the Reservoir. In fact, that's it there. It used to be right there by the community hall. And the old covered bridge was salvaged. They hauled it off to Unadilla, and then it burned. It was rebuilt, salvaged, and now it's on display at the Old Mill Village in New Milford, Pennsylvania. And over at the Papacton Cemetery, there is a section dedicated to the Cannonsville burials. Again, in the area of the Cannonsville Reservoir, there were 11 cemeteries, 2,123 remains. Total of 827 of these are reinterred in the Papacton burying ground, of which 341 have been identified. And this is the Cannon family. So that's pretty much the story. Again, what you see when you're over there is just gorgeous. And like I say, there's really no way of knowing what's down there under the water. It's like a picture postcard. Great place to go for a Sunday drive. Communities that for nearly 200 years provided home to 8 generations of residents, countless generations of indigenous people who lived, worked, and raised their families there, are all hidden below that water. So I think that's why, 3 generations have passed since then, and it's important that we tell the story and we keep telling the story so future generations know what happened. They know the history of that. So that's all I have to say, although I want to show you something. There was that video that I mentioned, the Indian Summer. I'm going to show you a short clip of it. It's just selected pieces that are put together to show you some of what happened when they were clearing the land. The original soundtrack was by Pete Seeger. I did not use that. What I used was a piece of music that was composed by a guy named Gary Teed, who lived in Cannonsville. His family was forced out. And shortly after that, he's a folk singer. Shortly after that, he put a little song together. So I joined the two together, and hope you don't mind, but I'm going to show you this. It takes about 5 minutes. And hopefully the music will come through. Donna, is the music coming through?
No, I'm not hearing anything.
Okay, hold on a second. I'm going to unshare, make an adjustment, and reshare. Okay, I'm going to try again.
We can hear it now.
They came from New York City to the land where beauty lies, and what they did to people here would make a grown men cry. They wanted our water, so they pushed us all aside. They took away our livelihood, and the cottage slowly died. Oh, Canonsville, I see you through the teardrops in my eyes. Though you lie beneath the waves now, in my heart you'll never die. They came and took our home away. I couldn't understand, and all of the farmers here were dealt a heavy blow. 50 cents on the dollar was all they would give, and you couldn't tell them no. Oh, Canonsville, I see you through the teardrops in my eyes. Though you lie beneath the waves now, in my heart you'll never die. Oh, walk your dusty roads once again on a warm summer's day without end. Stroll on Grandpa's farm and enjoy that country charm, or to drop a fishing line at the river bend. Don't put me through that pain. They even have a word for it. They call it eminent domain. And to those who cannot see why I feel so for this life, let me show you all the beauty there is to see. Maybe then you'll understand. Oh, Canonsville, I see you through the teardrops in my eyes. Though you lie beneath the waves now, in my heart you'll never die. Oh, Canonsville, I see you teardrops in my eyes. Though you lie beneath the waves now,